Okay, we are live, Kim.
Okay, thank you very much, Du, and welcome everyone to the Wednesday, October 26th meeting of the San Diego LAFCO Special Districts Advisory Committee meeting. Thank you all for joining us today. This meeting has been a few years in the making, and I'm looking forward to some lively discussion. With that, I'll call the meeting to order and ask that the roll be called for the committee members.
Good morning, everyone. So Kimberly Thorner,
Present.
Jack Beebe,
Present.
Ann Baldridge,
Present.
Paul Bushy is absent, James Gordon,
Present.
Diane Hansen is absent, Tom Kennedy,
Morning, Erica. I'm here.
morning, Al Lau,
Here.
Hector Martinez is absent, Dave McQueen,
Present.
Marty Miller,
Here.
Mark Roback is absent, Joel Scalzitti,
I'm here, present.
Mike Sims,
Present.
Oliver Smith,
Here.
John Van Dorn is absent. So there are 11 members present. There is a quorum.
Oh, good. Thank you. All right,
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate that. All right, so today is actually National Day of the Deployed, honoring military deployed around the globe. And so I would like to have the pledge in that honor, and I believe Mr. Kennedy is going to put the flag up for us. And I ask everyone to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Ready? Begin. I pledge
Allegiance
to
to
the
the
flag
flag
of the United
of
States
the
of
United States
America,
of America,
to the republic,
republic for which it stands,
one nation,
under
one
God,
nation, under God,
with liberty
indivisible,
liberty,
and
justice
justice
for all.
liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Keen, would you want to review the agenda with us and let us know if you have any requested changes?
Thank you, Chair Thorner, and good morning, committee members and guests. So no changes to the agenda. What you have before you as part of this special meeting is holding firm. Obviously, the big item will be a discussion about the Fallbrook Rainbow reorganization proposals. Priscilla and Adam will be handling that. And then after that, we're going to have a brief discussion about our municipal service reviews and in particular our policies. But that said, I did want to just highlight for those who are watching us over the live stream or through our Zoom application, we are set up to be able to take comments in real time. Erica and Michaela being our newest member of the LAFCO team, are going to be watching our inbox. And so, Chair Thorner, I already know that we have a few emails that were received this morning for item 4B. So, and I would assume we'll get some more. So when you see fit, when you take up that item, we'll rely on Michaela to read those emails into the record and perhaps give Michaela some discretion to try to fit in the comments within 3 minutes. So with that, we're all good at staff. Thank you so much.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. All right. With that, we're going to move on to item number 3. And this is an opportunity for members of the public to address the committee on anything that is not part of the agenda. And so I would ask Michaela anyone, if we have any comments not related to anything already on the agenda.
Nothing unrelated.
Nothing unrelated? Okay. All right. That made that one quite easy. So now we are on to the business items. And the first business item we have is item 4A, and the minutes were in your packet. Approval of the meeting minutes for March 18th, 2022. Does anyone have any comments, suggestions on the minutes? If not, I would entertain a motion on the minutes.
So moved.
So moved, Mr. Sims,
I'll second.
second, Mr. Beebe. Okay, do we need to do a roll call or can we do by voice on this one since it is action? I believe we have to do roll call, right? Yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you, Alex. All right, can we have the roll on the minutes, please?
Okay. Kimberly Thorner,
Yes.
Jack Beebe,
Yes.
Ann Baldridge,
Yes.
James Gordon,
Yes.
Tom Kennedy,
Yes.
Al Lau.
I'll abstain since I was absent.
Okay. Dave McQueen,
Abstain, absent.
Marty Miller,
Abstain, absent.
Joel Scalzitti,
Yes.
Mike Sims,
Yes.
Oliver Smith,
Aye.
One second. Okay, so we have 8 in favor, 3 opposed. The motion passes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so now we are on to item 4B. And why don't we go ahead and take any public comments or speakers on the item before we go into the staff report and then discussion by the committee. Do we have any, why don't we start with the written comments? Do we have any written comments for the committee?
So Michaela, if you'd be kind enough to read the emails with the 3 minutes in mind of the ones that you have received already, and then perhaps Chair Thorner, before we close this item, I assume we might get some more and then we'll come back to Michaela, but I think you have at least 2 from this morning.
Yes, I do. I'm not sure. Do you want me to just read half of both of them? Because I don't think they're going to be under 3 minutes, but I can do my best.
Do your best, and then if Kim looks at you with a stern face, we will say the rest will be posted online.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so we've got one from Gary Hurst, and he said, I am a director of Ramona Municipal Water District and the elected Ramona Director of San Diego County Water Authority. The tentative LAFCO staff conclusions being presented today were made available only on Wednesday afternoon, the 25th of October, too late to allow thorough analysis. However, some issues are readily apparent. The 2 member agencies seeking detachment from SDCWA participated in many votes, resulting in the expenditure of billions of dollars to provide more reliable water supplies to SDCWA members, agencies that are available to Metropolitan Water District, Southern California, member agencies, including Eastern. Failing to hold Fallbrook and Rainbow responsible for paying their proportionate share of those capital expenses is a gross injustice to the other SDCWA member agencies. Met has announced that members agencies will surely be required to implement the next stage of their water conservation plans within months, demonstrating the inaccuracy of the staff conclusion that Met water supply is adequate and can reasonably accommodate demands now and going forward. 6 Met members agencies are already receiving only health and human services supplies, which must be repaid within 5 years. SDCWA is decades ahead of Met investing in desalination facilities, water storage reservoirs, and inventory, and higher priority Colorado River supplies. The staff conclusions grossly underestimate the effect on Ramona ratepayers if the remaining 22 SDCWA member agencies must pay the proportion of fixed expenses for which Fallbrook and Rainbow are responsible. The only demands that might replace Fallbrook and Rainbow demands in the foreseeable future are those of tribes, which are much smaller than the volume of water supplied to Fallbrook and Rainbow. And then the second one comes from Jose Martinez. And he says, on behalf of Otay Water District, I have the following preliminary objections to the tentative LAFCO staff conclusions stated in the prospectus. The statement that Eastern's water supply via Met is adequate and can reasonably accommodate demands now and going forward for both Fallbrook and Rainbow MWD is not accurate. It is public knowledge that MWD is now in the process of preparing the ration its available water supplies as soon as January 2023. If MWD uses the same model it did in earlier droughts, agricultural water use could be reduced by as much as 90% or completely prohibited under the human health and safety formula MWD is currently using in other parts of its service area. There is no support for the statement that Fallbrook and Rainbow customers will see cost savings in the amounts indicated by LAFCO staff or in any amount. It is public knowledge that MWD is projecting the need to spend tens of billions of dollars in order to secure a reliable water supply, which it does not now have. And the conclusion that other county water authority members, ratepayers will have to pay higher rates is correct, but the prospectus greatly understated the magnitude of these rate hikers. LAFCO staff is correct that voting rights at MWD are valuable and a valid concern, but its proposed solution would violate California law. And last, the prospectus solution would also violate CEQA and the Delta Reform Act of 2009. And that was it.
Thank you. You have both of those done in 4 minutes, so I appreciate that. Very well done.
Thank you.
So why don't we move on now to speakers that we have in person on the subject matter? And I see a few familiar faces. Keen, do you have a list of folks that want to speak, or should?
Well, let's, I think Erica has in some order, whoever registered first, but if not, Erica, we'll, I guess, defer to you to list them as you see fit.
I didn't get any registered speakers. I know due forward one, Mel Katz.
Chair Katz did indicate in writing that he wanted to speak on item 4.
Okay.
So Chair, do you want to go ahead and start us off?
Yes, thank you. Chair Thorner, Vice Chair Beebe, members of the Advisory Committee. Good morning. My name is Mel Katz, and I am the chair of the San Diego County Water Authority, and I'm also a business owner in San Diego. And at least 5 of you already know this because I have the honor to serve with you on our board of directors. My request of you today, and especially to the Water Authority board members, is that no action be taken or guidance given by this advisory group to LAFCO staff or the commissioners until the Water Authority Board of Directors has had a fair opportunity to review this prospectus and provide comments. The Water Authority received this prospectus that's in front of you today only yesterday at 3 p.m. Given the short timing, I feel it's only fair that the Water Authority Board of Directors and staff be given a fair opportunity to be heard before any advice or direction is given by this advisory group. This is my personal request to you. It's also made on behalf of our board of directors. I thank you for your consideration and for the opportunity to speak here this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Katz. Do we have any other folks on the line that wish to be heard on this matter? Okay, I'll ask again when we get to the end of the staff presentation. I will echo before we start. Oh, Al, do you have your hand up? My apologies.
Thank you, Chair. Just more of before we begin the staff presentation, I think I have more of a process question for both you and Keen. So if you at least allow me to more of asking this. So with that said, obviously this particular item, there's a couple of members on the committee obviously have direct financial implication with respect to the representative to both Fallbrook and Rainbow. And some of us who are also on the committee, having said that, are also members of the Water Authority as well, who have indirect financial implication as a result of all this. So with that said, again, just relate to possible action. I'm not an attorney, and of course, I'm going to defer to you, Chair, as well, and Keen, as well as the General Counsel for LAFCO as well. It's more of how appropriate is it for those of us who may have potential conflict of interest to provide a recommendation or to the LAFCO board. I think receiving information will be appropriate, but provide action seems problematic, at least from my perspective. So with that, I just like to kind of get input from the chair and the general counsel and King as well on that.
Okay. Thank you, Al, and thank you for giving me the heads up on this as well. So I don't believe, first off, every entity in San Diego County has some direct or indirect effect on this, right? Because you're talking about not just water rates, you're talking about property tax allocations, right? Between counties. And so every entity has some kind of direct or indirect effect, no matter what way it is. This committee is not, we are not a voting approval authority. We're an advisory committee, and we're not necessarily an advisory committee to LAFCO itself. We're an advisory committee to the executive director. And so I don't believe, and I do, knowing who's on this committee, I don't believe it is appropriate to take action today. I don't, and I can tell you right now that this committee probably will not get consensus on an action, but I do believe we have an obligation, and to Keen, and this is why we are here, to review what he put forward and provide comments on where, or ask questions, and maybe give that type of input, comments and questions to the executive director. Ultimately, it is the executive director's decision what he takes forward to the LAFCO board for vote, right? At the end of the day. I do also hear the frustration of only having this for a couple of days, and for people who've been immersed in it daily for the last couple of years, probably have a better comprehension of what it means versus those trying to absorb it. This committee has heard this item multiple times, and so I do expect this committee would at least have the opportunity to give input, comments, and suggestions to the executive director. So that's where I'm going, but I don't believe action of this committee is advisable today. Keen, did you want to add anything to that?
I'm going to thank you, Chair. Let me defer to Alex on the good question of Al, because it will play out not just for you, but we have city committee tomorrow, and then the ad hoc in a few weeks or so.
Thank you, King. I think Chair Thorner got it right. Is because if this was a substantive decision, the analysis would be different. But this is an advisory decision, so there is no conflict of interest at play either under the Political Reform Act or the Government Code Section 1090. So it's really up to the representatives of, if a decision is taken, then it would be up to the representatives of Rainbow and Fallbrook to determine for themselves whether or not they want to participate in that decision.
Thank you. Al, does that address your concerns?
It does. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, with that, we'll call for any other speakers once we get towards the end of the item. But with that, I would like to have the staff presentation on this item, please.
Thank you, Chair Thorner. So Adam Wilson, our lead consultant on the topic, as well as Priscilla Mumpower, are going to offer up and divide up the presentation to the committee. And then certainly a big part of this, maybe the key part in many ways, is not hearing from us, but us hearing from you, as the chair mentioned. This is about getting your feedback starting today and going forward on what has been a very long process. But today is a kind of a new starting point where we are offering up some flexible but somewhat concrete thoughts on how we're digesting information. And as we go forward, nothing's fixed, but we want to hear from all of you, the cities, and then our ad hoc, and then ultimately Riverside LAFCO before we get to the commission, perhaps as early as February of 23. So with that, I'm going to hand this off first to Adam, and then Priscilla, and then hopefully have a robust discussion through the chair.
Thanks, Keen. Good morning, Chair Thorner and advisory committee members. I see a lot of familiar faces in here, but for those that I don't recognize, just a quick way of introduction. As Keen noted, my name is Adam Wilson, and I've been serving as moderator to the ad hoc and outside consultant to the process and to LAFCO staff. So to begin, I think it might just be a little helpful to provide a brief overview on why we're before you today and how we exactly got here. So real quickly, in March 2020, both Rainbow and Fallbrook filed applications to detach from the County Water Authority. In short, they believe there's a cost savings by purchasing water from Eastern Municipal Water District in Riverside County. The County Water Authority is on record opposing this action unless certain stipulations are met. San Diego County LAFCO, through an MOU with Riverside, is the lead in processing these proposals. And to help facilitate the process, an ad hoc committee was formed to advise LAFCO staff. Over the last 2 years, the ad hoc committee has met nearly a dozen times, with the bulk of their work involving the review of an independent report and analysis from water economy expert Dr. Michael Hanneman. And just to briefly go over Dr. Hanneman's report, it essentially concluded 3 things. Number one, that the Water Authority's water supply is superior to that of Eastern's, given the diversification of their portfolio. However, Eastern's supplies are adequate. Number 2, that there will be a financial impact should Rainbow and Fallbrook detach, equating to a $12.8 million annual decrease in revenue to the County Water Authority. And lastly, an exit or detachment fee is a fair and reasonable condition to neutralize the impacts to the Water Authority and remaining agencies, and that somewhere between a 3 and 10 year window of time would be the appropriate amount to alleviate and transition the matter. So subsequent to this independent report, the ad hoc convened and generally accepted the report as complete and factual, with caveats from both subject agencies that continue to highlight their individual positions. The ad hoc then took things a step further and convened a working group to drill down a little deeper on the potential rate impacts. This working group also concluded that rate impacts would occur to remaining agencies. However, they took it one step further. They took Hanneman's original $12 million annual hit to the Water Authority and calculated out the proportional percentage of the annual contributions from 3 agencies, which were the City of San Diego, the City of Poway, and Valley Center. These 3 were chosen to give a broad context between large and small wholesalers, as well as municipal versus ag. This resulted in the City of Poway would see an increase of $276,000 per year in the short term, with the City of San Diego seeing an increase of $4.6 million, and Valley Center $528,000 on an annual increase. LAFCO staff took this a step even further, equating the annual impact to individual ratepayers, which we'll touch on a bit more later. All of this information has then prompted the development of a staff report, which remains a work in progress. However, we're here today as a first step in gaining some input from your advisory body, as well as any other interested parties. We have prepared and provided a summary report, which highlights the tentative conclusions and recommendations that are being considered at this time. I'm going to pass the baton over to Priscilla, whom will highlight the prospectus in further detail. And after such, we will open the floor to any Q&A, comments, and ultimately the hope that we can get your feedback and to provide a recommendation if you see fit. So with that, Priscilla.
Yes, thank you, Adam. Good morning, advisory committee members. And thank you again, Adam, for the great overview on the work that's been done so far and then the timeline preceding today's meeting. So again, my name is Priscilla Mumpower. I serve as the project manager for these proposals. So I'll begin with saying that this prospectus is a broad stroke overview highlighting key policy considerations and staff's tentative leanings on these policy issues. The key word here being tentative. There are also other policy issues that staff anticipates addressing. However, they don't make it to the top of the list with respect to today's presentation. And before jumping into it, and while Dew gets the PowerPoint up for me, I want to again note that these are tentative conclusions. They're not concrete, they're not fixed. It's a starting point to a public conversation. And so with this in mind, staff would ask that you try to digest these issues via two lenses or hats. One being as an individual on behalf of your respective member agency, and the other being as an advisory member of this committee responsible for advising LAFCO. And with that, I'm going to jump into it. So I'll begin with number one, and with LAFCO's authority in processing these proposals and our conclusion that LAFCO statute governs and not the County Water Authorities Act in the consideration of the proposals, and means that LAFCO has broad authority to not only approve the proposals, but to condition them. Now, you will recall from Adam's overview that there were three main topics needing to be addressed as part of the ad hoc process. And those were number one, water reliability, two, water rate impacts, and three, the contemplating of an exit fee. Now, the following 5 policy considerations are associated with these topics. That would be the 4 that are below on this one, and then number 1 on the following slide. So with respect to Eastern Municipal Water District supply reliability, we believe them to be reliable. We recognize that the County Water Authority has a superior and more diverse potable water supply portfolio. However, Eastern Municipal Water District's own supply via MET is adequate and can reasonably accommodate the demands for both Fallbrook and Rainbow now and going forward. With respect to Eastern Municipal Water District's fiscal standing, we find their finances are healthy. Standard measurements used to assess Eastern Municipal Water District's financial standing shows that they've trended positively over the last 5 fiscal years with respect to liquidity, capital, and margin levels. The latter highlighted by Eastern finishing with positive total margins in 4 of the 5 years, with an overall average of 4.5%. With respect to whether ratepayers within the affected territory can expect to see cost savings as a result of the proposed attachments, we tentatively conclude that they will. LAFCO estimates the average monthly household impact for Fallbrook and Rainbow ratepayers to be $20.21 and $26.79 respectively, assuming a full pass-through to ratepayers. With respect to whether ratepayers within the remaining member agencies would see cost increases, we tentatively conclude that they will see increases. LAFCO estimates through the help of an ad hoc working group that the average monthly household impact for the remaining member agencies of the County Water Authority is $2.20, assuming full pass-through to ratepayers. As an example, we estimate the impact to ratepayers within the city of San Diego, the largest County Water Authority customer, is estimated at a monthly household impact of $1.05. Now, on our next slide, with respect to contemplating an exit fee and whether it would be appropriate, we believe it is, and our leaning is that an appropriate standard is a length of 5 years. Staff believes it to be appropriate to condition the approval on an annual exit fee that is equal to the estimated revenue loss to County Water Authority and involving water sales, property taxes, and fees. This annual fee was estimated by Dr. Hanneman at $12.6 million in the short run. Now, the purpose of requiring an exit fee is to provide the County Water Authority and its member agencies a level of financial protection in the short run while they adjust to the changed financial situation associated with the detachments. However, we also believe it would be appropriate and reasonable to offset the exit fee to reflect any savings by the County Water Authority that would otherwise be expended on proceeding with the previously planned construction of the ESP North County pump station. Now, the value of the associated savings remains a topic of ongoing analysis. Now, separate from the three main topics that I previously noted and specific to the topic of County Water Authority's loss of voting rights at Met, we recognize that a small proportional change in voting rights at Met would follow should the detachments take place, and that it is substantive. Staff believes a possible and otherwise merited solution to this would be to apply a separate condition to require an MOU between Eastern Municipal Water District and the County Water Authority, and in doing so, retain their voting apportionment associated with Fallbrook and Rainbow for at least the first 5 years. With respect to the topic of CEQA exemptions, staff believes the Class 20 exemption appropriately applies to both proposals, given the underlying action involves the transfer of existing municipal service functions within the same area and with no additional powers or expansions. Lastly, and on the next slide, staff is aware that there are other terms and/or measures that may be appropriate and based on Commission's preferences. Two key examples being, one, a LAFCO prescribed rollout requiring Fallbrook and Rainbow to remain member agencies with the County Water Authority for a specified period of time before allowing the detachments to formally proceed, and/or requiring the completion of a municipal service review on the County Water Authority. We are similarly aware of other terms and/or measures that have been raised by others, a key example being the County Water Authority requesting to condition proposal approvals on expanding the effective territory for purposes of calling an election to include all registered voters within its member agency's boundaries. Now, Commission Council does not believe this option is available. And with that, I conclude the summary of the key policy considerations. Again, I want to reiterate that these are tentative. Today serves as an opportunity for the members of this committee and the public to provide valuable feedback and input as we continue our analysis and administrative review. We still have items that remain to be done, such as completing the staff report and addressing all statutory and local policy factors, and also scheduling a public hearing, which we anticipate will be scheduled for February of 2023. In the interim, we're here to answer questions and provide information which is available online. So with all of this in mind, I think I've given you a lot of information. So I'm going to go ahead and conclude the presentation and hand it back over to Adam.
Thanks, Priscilla. Very well done. And thank you for that presentation. And I will essentially just echo and echo what the conclusion is. And ultimately, Chair Thorner, this is, as Keen, Priscilla, and I have mentioned, this is now the opportunity to give the floor to you and your committee members to ultimately give us the feedback and input on the material that's been presented today. And as I said, as you see fit, if there's any sort of recommendation, whether it's receive and accept, whether it's we're in the right direction, whether anything that you could signal us that would help us move this process to the finish line, it would be best and appropriate to kind of hand it over to you guys to have any questions and answers and open the floor open to any deliberation. So thank you.
Thank you, Adam and Priscilla, especially for putting what has been many years worth of a conversation into something concise that we can start giving some feedback on. I do see hands raised in the queue. Mr. Kennedy, we'll start with you.
All right, thank you, Chair Thorner, and thank you, Priscilla and Adam, for your work on this. I guess there's there must be raining cats and dogs outside. As you heard in the comments from Jose, which was essentially a form letter the Water Authority sent out yesterday, the Water Authority feels that the MWD voting issue, I wouldn't call it illegal, but it's unworkable. But I think there's another issue with the MWD voting thing, is that in this, the way it's described by LAFCO is that it's substantive. We've done an analysis on all the voting at MWD for the last 10 years, which is just under 1,000 votes. And that one vote is the only vote that would have been changed, would it be done. So I don't know how you make a finding that something's substantive when there's 1,000 votes and only one might have changed. So I think that it is an issue, but the remedy prescribed here is likely fraught with legal issues because the MWD Act just simply doesn't allow it. I think that one of the things when we look at this, we have a disagreement with LAFCO over whether the CWA Act applies or not. We're at a certain point we have to accept where LAFCO is going on this. I think that in my rotary four-way test thinking, is it fair is the number one thing, and I think that while we wish it wasn't that way, I think the 5-year roll-off or payment, keeping everyone whole for 5 years matches up well with the Water Authority's longest fixed charge. Assuming we get appropriate credit for the pump stations, there's 2, so there's pump stations. It's a bitter pill for us, but it's probably better than going down in flaming defeat on that. But I think that those are the main issues that we see with this. We recognize that the Water Authority may have superior reliability, but for most of our customers who are agricultural or on PSAR, a great deal of our volume is on PSAR. They're with Met reliability already, so it doesn't make that much difference to us. So those are the basic comments I have in this. I think that when we look at, if anybody would like, I can send out the spreadsheet. My executive secretary spent quite a bit of time going through all the Met voting records for the last umpteen years and put all this together, but it's not a substantive issue. So I'll pass that on to Mr. Haddam, who today we agree on a topic. Mark, come on, got to get a smile out of you.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Before we move on, I actually might want to ask Alex and Keen to address something that Mr. Kennedy brought up, because it was something that I was also concerned about, is the voting rights. And my understanding is it is the Met Act that prescribes the voting rights. And I don't know the answer to this question, but I don't think that you can legally circumvent the Metropolitan Act by an MOU.
So we have a meeting with the legal counsel for both Eastern and Metro, and this is an ongoing discussion we're having with them.
Okay, so it's yet to be resolved. Okay, just on its face, it doesn't necessarily feel right to me. I don't think that the Water Authority would ever let member agencies by an MOU decide to transfer its voting rights. And so this one will be very interesting to see what I think this comes down to being a legal issue, what you legally can do or not. Okay, thank you. I'm going to stay with committee members. I'll come to you towards the end, Mr. Haddam. Going on to Marty Miller, Mr. Miller.
Thank you. I'm trying to get my stuff organized here. First of all, I consider Tom Kennedy and Jack Beebe water friends, so I don't want them to take that I'm attacking them, because I like the guys personally. But on the thing about voting rights, the history of San Diego over the last 20 years at the Met has been fraught with division. So you could go back very easily and find 900 votes that San Diego got its butt kicked on that had nothing to do with 1 or 2% of voting rights. But just to illuminate, the other day, the vote on the admin code being waived was a 52-48 vote. Prior to that, we had another vote that was about an ethics report that we wanted public, and that vote was 51-49. So San Diego's come a long way in the last 3 or 4 years to get to a point where it's about a 50-50 split at the board there. So losing 1 or 1.5% of our voting rights will have an effect on the voting. And I agree with Director Thorner that there's probably more to this than meets the eye of saying something as simple as making an agreement. And I think Tom alluded to that too, that it may not be possible, but it definitely is a factor in today's voting there. I have other questions, but we can move on and I can come back to them. I don't want to take up everybody's time right now. Thank you, Kim.
Okay, well, I'll come back to you. I'll group back to you later. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Beebe.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Thorner. Yeah, I appreciate everyone's feedback on this. You know, my one hope is that you know, everyone kind of gets out whatever their thoughts are today. So we don't meet again, is kind of my hope. We tend to, you know, I know some of you haven't been dealing with this day in, day out, but you know, I'm just hopeful everyone kind of takes this opportunity to get their thoughts out so we can move this this process along. A couple things to note. So, you know, I've been involved on the advisory committee for some time. I'd like to say how long, but I can't exactly remember at this point. The one interesting thing is, this is one of the few things I've seen where we didn't start with what does the law say, right? And the reason I think it's still important to put that in context is there is an act, there is a County Water Authority Act. The County Water Authority is essentially a joint powers authority by another name. So we all agreed to form it. We all, you know, we agreed when we formed it, Fallbrook was one of the original members of the Water Authority, of what the rules were. And there's clear rules of what to do when you leave. If we all as a group said, hey, we don't like those rules, that when you leave, we should do something different, then we could have changed them, but we didn't. And so my only concern with the philosophy we're taking here, and largely, you know, I think it's because of, you know, the efforts and pushback on the Water Authority side to say, well, we need to do something more than the Act says, is it sets a precedence for anyone who's in a joint powers authority. For those entities, you know, the East County project, they have a joint powers authority. It likely has terms when when a member wants to leave. Right. So those entities came together and say, hey, here's the terms. If you join, this is what happens. If you someday want to leave, here's what happens. And as entities, we agreed on it. LAFCO's sort of overriding that and saying, yeah, well, these are the terms, but, you know, we're going to impose our other terms so that, you know, the city of San Diego doesn't have to pay an additional $1 a month in fees. So that is a little bit of a concern of just how it's being approached, and sort of our perspective, especially up with a lot of the Fallbrook ratepayers, is they see that $20 a month that we've been paying and sort of ask, what have we been paying $20 a month for, except to help subsidize everyone else's costs? So it's sort of saying, hey, has this really been fair to us? Is the arrangement been worth this $20 a month? And then we're saying, well, no, it doesn't seem like it, but you still have to keep paying it. And so that is still a concern. On top of that, as Tom said, you know, if we have to pay something to get out, you know, so be it, but we'd like to see this move along, and think about the precedents that we're setting by sort of LAFCO overriding what is an existing, you know, agreement among the parties. The other side of it on the Met vote is we really need to think about, you know, a couple things on what we're talking about. So less than 0.5% at the Met vote. Yes, there's been some contentious votes at Met right now, but if our thought is that is the future forever of Metropolitan, that we're going to accomplish big thing regionally by 0.3% voting percentage, that we're going to get Bay Delta issues resolved, then we're all really in a lot of trouble. So, you know, these generally decisions they have to make at Met are decades-long investments that are going to be expensive, right? We acknowledge that. We also acknowledge everyone in Met is going to pay for those, including the Water Authority in some fashion. And they're not going to be decided by that small a margin. They'll never get done. Nothing will ever happen if that's where we're at, within 0.3% at Met. It's also important to remember is that's not the Water Authority's vote per se, right? That's the valuation of our ratepayers assessed to the Water Authority. And so if our ratepayers say, hey, we do want to go to Eastern, we support what Eastern stands for, why their vote doesn't go with them is really an interesting question. And our board, quite honestly, Tom and I really appreciate Marty and his efforts at Met, but a lot of times we have a different opinion. Our board and us, Tom and myself as members, sort of have a different opinion on some items that are at Met too. So why that stays is a little confusing, and why I don't really see it as a functionally that big an issue. I mean, we barely count at the Water Authority our vote, so it really doesn't matter at Met. I'm worried it's a poison pill in the contract, that there's no way to accomplish it. So for something that was one vote in the last 1,000, we're going to create a condition that can't be met and, you know, undermines all this effort over the last few years. So I think that's really not so much the substance of this small amount of met vote, but there's no real way to do it without going to the legislature and rewriting the Metropolitan Act. So that's it. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Beebe. If I'm reading between the lines, I think LAFCO staff was looking at one of the Water Authority's major concerns on the issue and tried to find a way to address it. But I think what Alex said earlier, that this needs to have some legal review and discussion with the actual entity met on that, still needs to be resolved. Do I have any other committee members that would like to make comments before I go to non-committee members? Mr. Miller, thank you.
I just have some just some general questions and maybe not even observations, but questions. Did Hanneman report, did it not just address a select amount of items that the Water Authority brought up as concerns? Or did Hanneman address all of the items?
Hanneman looked at pretty much, so Hanneman didn't look at the voting rights issue. He looked at the financial issues, right? He looked at the questions of whether or not Eastern was reliable, whether or not the Water Authority's supplies were superior. And then also looked at the overall financial impact, right? And that's where that 12.8 figure came out of. But it did not delve into, does LAFCO statute govern, does the voting rights? It was more on reliability of Eastern and the Water Authority and the financial impacts of the detachment. Those were the issues it covered.
Okay.
And just to clarify, Kimberly, and he studied the a potential exit or detachment fee.
That is correct. And his recommendation, I believe he didn't come out with anything hard. He said somewhere between 3 and 10 years was an appropriate time period. But so yeah, I hope that answers that one.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. On that subject, he said from 3 to 10 years. How did we derive, or what was the thought process to arrive at a 5-year buyout?
That was going to be one of my questions too. So great question.
I can take this one. So Dr. Hanneman pointed out in his report that anywhere from 3 years to 10 years would be standard, just based on his previous analysis and review of other, I guess, proposals that have happened in the past. And so we've landed at the 5-year mark as a good standard based on that 3 to 10 year mark on what has happened in the past and his perspective on that.
Kim, if I could add too, that the working group, when they convened, they also concluded that a 5-year window would be appropriate when analyzing the financial impacts. And then also we saw some consistency with the long-term planning of special districts and water agencies, that they do their long-term outlooks at 5-year windows of time for their long-term planning. So we saw a lot of consistency in that 5-year window of time.
I appreciate that. So the Water Authority's contention is that 12 million is too low. And how do we resolve that discrepancy if the Water Authority believes it should be 20 million a year, simply because Dr. Hanneman said 12.8? How do we resolve that difference without being drawn into a legal battle? Is there any, I mean, that's just, so I guess, a statement rather than a question.
At the last ad hoc committee meeting, I think everyone thought the 12.8 with Hanneman was in the ballpark. My understanding and takeaway was that those were numbers from data, I think from fiscal year ending 2020, and that those numbers probably needed to be trued up with inflation over the past 2 years. And I know Mark Cadam has his hand raised, so maybe when we get to him, he can answer that question if he knows.
Okay. Thanks, Kim. like I said, maybe that's more of a statement than a question. The 12, in figuring the savings to Fallbrook and Rainbow, is this the 26 and the $20 a month savings, is that calculated prior to the $12.8 million a year exit fee or after the exit fee?
That's a great question. Does the savings that's in the report that says Fallbrook and Rainbow?
It's before the exit fee. So the exit fee will offset some of those savings.
Correct.
Depending what the exit fee is, it's before.
Okay, and then there's mention of a credit for the pump stations that have yet to be and probably aren't going to be built at this point in time. It's not even in our budget, I don't believe, at this point, and I could be corrected on that. I don't believe it's in the budget. But presently, Fallbrook and Rainbow are getting water from the water authority, so the pump station could be kind of looked at as a luxury item to be put in. I'm not the engineer, so maybe it isn't, maybe it is. I'm not sure that you can take something that has not even been designed or at today is not needed and say there's a big cash cow there to be accredited against the exit fee, but that's subject to debate at this point in time. I'm not saying that there is or isn't. I would say that there might not be, and maybe there will be, but I think that needs to be taken into consideration. If the pump stations are taken completely off the table and they're not even planned to be built, there is no credit and the ratepayers will have to absorb that 12.8 million. Now, but anyhow, the 5-year loss of voting rights, I don't disagree too much with what Jack said about being 3 or 4/10%. And in most cases, we're probably not going to lose a vote by that, but it's still a percentage. And we have, you've stated that this is for a 5-year program. How did that come to pass that this would only, if we had an agreement, if we could get an agreement, that it would have a sunset in 5 years? How did that come to pass?
I mean, Keen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the 5-year window, which we've related to the rate impacts, I think we're just trying to find some consistency with those other conditions that are related. And so being best and appropriate to kind of stay consistent with a general time frame, we stayed consistent with that 5-year window.
Correct. So Marty, just to hammer down, because it's an important part, that 5-year window, whether it's applying to the exit fee or in staff's mind, a possible MOU, is all about what's an appropriate adjustment period. The working group that the ad hoc created landed on their own 5-year window when coming up with kind of a macro impact for Poway, Valley Center, and San Diego. So we were just drawing from the working groups landing on 5 years. Maybe this committee would tell us that 5 years is too long. 5 years might be too short. That kind of input would be helpful.
Okay, well, I guess in my opinion, it's too short, but we can all agree to disagree on that. There is a cost that from what I understand, that Rainbow and possibly Fallbrook are going to incur to hook onto the Met line. And I assume that that has not been designed, so therefore it's the same ballpark as what the proposed pump station would have been. It's an unknown commodity, or has Rainbow and Fallbrook determined what that cost would be to hook in and unhook from the water authority and hook onto Met, what that cost would be? And is that cost as part of their proposed savings or cost of service?
Can I answer if you're asking a Fallbrook question?
Sure, as far as I'm concerned, you know more about it than I do.
Yeah, so I already take all my water off Met's connections. So just so you're aware, for Fallbrook, I don't have a single improvement to make. I actually don't have a single operational change to make within my service area. All my water is being received off pipelines that are only connected to Met's pipeline. So
for Rainbow, as of right now, 75% of our water comes off the Met connections. We do have a couple small pump stations for our high elevations in our southern service area. Those are going to begin construction early next year because we're building those irrespective of detachment. Those pump stations were planned prior to detachment because the transportation cost from the water authority is high enough to where the cost of those pump stations and operating them, it's cheaper to buy the water from Met and pay the capital cost for those improvements, which is going to be roughly $10 million. But those contracts are underway. I expect completion of those middle to late next year, irrespective of detachment.
Yeah. And
Okay, great. That's just trying to get an overview of what's happening.
I think there's one other misconception you had out there, Marty, and it was related to the emergency storage project pump stations. The pump stations aren't a luxury item. The ESP, which, as you all know, was one of the largest capital projects undertaken by the Water Authority, was designed to provide all their member agencies with service during shutdowns or loss of supplies from the north. The facilities to serve Fallbrook and Rainbow have never been built. All the other member agencies, well, I think Valley Centers is just wrapping up, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe Oliver can correct me. We don't have that. I can get a little water in my southern service area, but for the majority of a lot of my service area, we can't get any ESP water. We've been paying for those pump stations since the late 90s, total of about $25 million for Rainbow alone. And so what we're saying is that if we detach, you don't need to build them. If we stay in, they will have to pay it. The Water Authority themselves has pegged the number at $40 million. I believe Chair Thorner confirmed that number not too long ago at a Water Authority meeting. It's in their submittal. So there's a $40 million savings to the Water Authority instantly. There's also going to be O&M savings, even though the Water Authority's documents say there's none, but there are O&M activities that happen to serve us and a variety of other sorts of savings. So those ESP pump stations are not a luxury. They're something we paid for already, and that they need to be built if we stay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Tom. I appreciate you
I just
clearing that up.
Point of clarification. I think the Water Authority needs to be the one who states what the cost savings is. No one here should state it. It should be them.
Well, it's in their September 2020 document.
Okay. All right. But I don't want to throw out a figure in this committee meeting that isn't accurate. Marty, we're going back to you again on your questions.
Okay. What Tom just brought up something. We're talking about reliability, and the pump stations put in there so you can get water from the south if you can't get it from the north. But right now you're proposing getting all of your water from only the north. So you lose that benefit of being able to get emergency storage from the south. So if there was an earthquake and a line broke, heaven help us all, but you would be stranded because you wouldn't be getting water through the Met's pipeline. So you've actually, I mean, this has been stated. I don't think we're arguing that you're going to get the water from the Met. So, but there is a reliability issue there, and that's
Would you
just
like
going
me
to
to
be part of
address
the
that?
party.
No.
Okay.
Thank you, though. I do not want this to turn into a back and forth debate.
Just checking.
Yes.
Well,
As you know, I'm prepared at any moment to get
I do. I know very well.
Yeah, Tom's on it. I got it. Okay, I'll stop questioning for the moment. If something comes up, I'll raise my hand again. Thank you, Kim, for your patience.
Thank you for the questions. Do we have any other committee members that have comments, questions, input before I go external?
I
do.
Oh, I've got Mr. Lau. I'm sorry, was someone else say I do?
Scalzetti.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Scalzetti. And then we'll go to Mr. Lau.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to see if it was in some of the documents where obviously if what you were just talking about, if there's a severed pipe or whatever, if there was a special rate or there's some kind of measure that was spelled out, if it was to have some kind of emergency, how would they buy water from us if it was that spelled out? Because obviously, some of the stuff wasn't spelled out with the detachment. So I wanted to make sure that they thought about if they had to hook up as emergency, is there emergency rate or anything, or is that just something that would be done through the Water Authority and through Rainbow, or would LAFCO kind of spell some of the things out if there's emergency or temporary fee or rate in place? If they would think about that in some of that discussion, so we would have it spelled out ahead of time. Thank you.
I don't believe that's something that has been contemplated or brought up before. So I see Keen taking notes. Thank you.
I think it's important that we spell it out now in trying to figure it out later. And obviously, we're not going to say, no, we're not going to give you the water. We're neighbors. We're going to give them the water. But if we could have some kind of balance of how it should be reacted in case of emergency. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lau?
Yeah, this is kind of, again, the question related to the 5 years in the staff report. It seems like earlier the explanation was more qualitative of analysis, but I kind of think of this item as more economic, so perhaps a more quantitative analysis to determine the appropriate length. A quantitative economic analysis to determine that time. I don't know whether, I know it's a range provided earlier, but between 3 and 10. But given the makeup of this committee, I think everybody's going to have a different opinion of what that might be. So I think it might be stronger for staff to develop a stronger nexus if there's instead of quantitative, but instead of qualitative, have a quantitative analysis. Thanks.
Excellent comment. Thank you. Any other committee members have input?
I've got one quick thing again, Kim, sorry, but
nope,
just one of the things that came up that's a concern to me is you said that the water authority needs to tell us what the ESP pump stations cost, right? Throughout this process, we're going to be quite honest, is that they have put out numbers that have then been shown not to be correct. So early on, they said our net revenue impact was $40 million, which is more than we even send down to the water authority. So if you look at their submittal and they look at some of the out years, they show that the net revenue impact to other entities was going to be 40 million. That is why we had Dr. Hanneman do the analysis. So I actually did it myself, looking at rates, and came up with a number that was actually a little less than Hanneman's, but close. Hanneman did it independently. He came up with the $12.6 million. The water authorities continue to put out numbers that are different, right? And so that's why we had him out there. So if we're then going to go back and say, they identified in their submittal, if you look in the large submittal, they identified the ESP pump station cost, right? In the last meeting we had, the ad hoc committee, Sandy identified that here's this cost, and if they stay, we must spend it. That was quoted in the meeting. So now if we go back to them, I guarantee you the number will be $2 million, or we don't need them, or some other number. And so we're going to be going back in a circle. So I'm just hopeful that we use the information people submitted, and that, we aren't doing this opportunity where then, since it turned out different, they're going to change the answer, to try to make it less. So that's just my concern.
I trust the Water Authority CIP team has a grasp on what the projects cost, and they can produce those numbers. And I would offer that if we all had the same numbers, this would have been a very short meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. With that, I am going to go to Mr. Haddam, who's been patiently waiting with his hand up.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll just quickly go through a couple things, and I appreciate the invitation by the committee and Mr. Wilson to participate. Thank you for having me. My name is Mark Haddam. I'm on staff at the Water Authority as Special Counsel. Let me address first a couple of the things that were raised quickly. First of all, in the argument about Hanneman talking about precedent, there's no precedent for this. He came up with numbers. His 3 to 10 year estimate was based upon what he thought was reasonable. It's not based on some other comparable settings, because there really aren't any. The comparison that Mr. Beebe made to a JPA is completely inappropriate. It's not applicable at all. One's a statutory creation, one's a contractual creation. And in terms of Mr. Miller's question about what Hanneman looked at, I agree with the chair as to what he looked at. And there were a host of other issues raised by the Water Authority that he didn't look at. It wasn't part of his scope. We're not dinging him for that. It's just not something that he was hired to do. In terms of the true up that the chair referenced, the numbers, first of all, this $12 million some dollar number that is thrown out here in the prospectus, which, by the way, the prospectus is full of mistakes, and we'll be commenting in detail about it, and other parties will too. So one of the reasons I think that the committee should take no action today is to wait and see what all the parties have to say about the prospectus. But the true up, the estimate, that $12 point some million number, was based on a 2022 estimate, not actual. It was based on an estimate. The first true up you have to do is the actual. The actual is about 46% higher than that. Okay, the actual 22 use, because the estimates that the agencies gave for their use were significantly lower than what they actually used. So there's significant true up that would have to be done. Also, the figure that was being used by Hanneman, that was a revenue issue, not what he was suggesting for detachment. His detachment number went up to $18 million a year, not $12 million a year. So that's incorrect. The comments about the statute and the Med Act are completely correct. Mr. Beebe and Mr. Kennedy are correct. The Med Act in Section 55 mandates that the vote goes with the lands and with the member agency where those lands are located. So there is no way that we can sit down with Eastern, even if should we want to, or LAFCO want us to, and come up with some sort of agreement with them. There would have to be a legislative change for that. So that's a completely inappropriate estimate. I also want to point out that the financial numbers that are used, and Mr. Beebe's comments about all the water authorities numbers are wrong, and he thinks we're going to come out with $1 for the ESP station or whatever. This is total nonsense. Our numbers have been vetted by extensive experts in our finance department. They've not been drafted by me or other attorneys or drafted by accountants. If there's errors, people can point them out. All these ones that Mr. Beebe talks about having made have not been pointed out because they don't exist. And the simple fact is, even if you take, the numbers are underestimated as to the losses. The Water Authority gets about 6 to 7% of its revenues from Fallbrook and Rainbow. If this were to go through, those losses are for decades. They are not for 5 years or 7 years or 10 years. They are for decades, and the rest of this county will pay the bill. Even if you look at the numbers that LAFCO is using, what's basically being said here is the rest of the county has to pay $2 a month forever so that Fallbrook and Rainbow can save $20 a month. That's what they're saying. Now, the numbers are wrong. The actual numbers are worse than that. But even if you took their numbers at face value, that's what's being said. So this committee needs to think long and hard about whether it wants to support rate increases for its constituent agencies and ratepayers so that Fallbrook and Rainbow can leave and go elsewhere and get out of all the obligations that have been entered for their benefit by the Water Authority. There's also numerous other issues such as CEQA. The Bay Delta is not even talked about in this document. It's completely silent about it, even though we've raised it many times and submitted all the evidence that the Bay Delta will be severely impacted by this, that the increase goes to Met. It's more demand on Met. And the final thing I'd like to point out, and I'll be quiet, is that Met is in serious trouble right now, okay? A third of their population is under health and safety restrictions that include restrictions on agriculture. And Met is asking for data from all member agencies to potentially go to the whole thing for the entire service area in January. For the information's completely stale. When LAFCO says Met's reliable, Met's adequate, first of all, it wasn't true 2 years ago or 3 years ago when these applications were filed. It's certainly not true now. And to rely on things that are years old to present to this committee or to the commission is completely inappropriate. Met is in a terrible state right now. Their water reliability is a huge problem. It's particularly a problem for agriculture, which these agencies say that they care about quite a bit, and I know LAFCO does. So there's significant problems here. We look forward to submitting comments by November 30th, which is the deadline, and we would ask the committee to wait until that time to make any judgments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haddam. Mr. Lau, I see your hand up. Did you just not take it down from the past?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Do I have any other committee member comments, suggestions? Okay, I did have one question and then maybe a statement on the property tax exchange process. It states that the allocation, the Water Authority would have $723,000 eliminated Is that factored into the exit fee? Did you add that into the exit fee, or is that separate and there's no way to recover that? I didn't understand because they're two separate issues.
They, well, they're separate, but they have been incorporated into the exit fee.
Okay. All right. And I did have a lot of the questions some of the committee members asked about the 5-year rolling average. And I do think probably bringing a nexus for it back is very wise. I'll offer some a little bit of chair prerogative right here. It feels like this has been at like DEFCON 4 for a while, and you're at the point where you finally put something out for people to chew on. And November 30th is the deadline, and it looks like you have a timeline for presentation to LAFCO itself by February. I would offer to the parties that now is probably the time for the 3 parties to come together and see if there's a resolution on this. And I know I have heard, oh, the time for talking is past. The time for talking is never past, and the time for creative solutions is never past. One of the things I've consistently heard is people aren't listening to each other, right? Just stating their opinions without listening. And so my advice, if there is any possibility of the 3 agencies getting together, maybe with their chairs and their GMs, to see if there's one opportunity to resolve this before it goes to commission. I would advise that, because at the end of the day, you have this time period, this couple-month time period to seek a solution, and then it goes to LAFCO. And then after that, it's only the lawyers that are going to be successful on this. So, and I don't mind lawyers being successful, but boy, I would much rather have the ratepayers being successful for the entire county and both the agencies. So just offering that out if that opportunity is out there. I also want to offer my compliments to LAFCO staff for the report. Only one thing, I think you're hearkening back to the Fallbrook Rainbow merger years ago when you inverted the general managers on the chart. You have Jack Beebe in charge of Rainbow and Tom Kennedy in charge of Fallbrook. We probably want to fix that. But I also want to say it was easy to digest for the layperson, the way that you formatted it. So my appreciation for that effort as well. And if there are no other comments, oh, Mr. Kennedy, you have your hand up. Yes, okay.
I apologize. Something I forgot to mention earlier, and I appreciate your words. And as we've said since May of 2019, we're happy to sit down with the Water Authority and talk about this thing. We never wanted to put a burning bag of something on LAFCO's doorstep, and yet we have apparently. There was a mention in the report about the potential for conducting a municipal service review on the Water Authority as a prerequisite for this. And I wanted to address that briefly. And I know we're going to be talking about the MSR policy coming up, and under that policy, it might be contemplated. But the reality is that the MSR addendum for Eastern is appropriate because we're annexing into there. The only impacts on the Water Authority on detachment would be one of the impacts that Dr. Hanneman had evaluated. I think we've evaluated the impacts to the Water Authority ad nauseum. So a municipal service review would not add any particular additional value for the commission in this situation. So while I appreciate LAFCO, want to do municipal service reviews, and one for the Water Authority is upcoming from what I understand, I don't think it's appropriate to condition the timing of this on the completion of that, which will likely take 18 months or something like that. We've already been at this 2.5 years plus, and we've evaluated the impacts on the Water Authority ad nauseum. So I think it's just time to move forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Anyone else have any input, advice, guidance on this issue? Okay. Thank you all for your attendance and consideration on this. As you saw, November 30th is the opportunity to provide comment through, and I think it's in the agenda, how to provide comments to LAFCO staff, with the intent that this looks like it's going on February of 2023 to commission. So please provide your comments by the November 30th deadline. All right, with that, thank you for anyone. You're welcome to stay on. We're moving on to item 4C, which is the draft policy update on the municipal service review. And Keen, do you want to address that one with us?
I will, and given the hour, I will be somewhat briefer than I was going to be because I think most of you are already familiar with the municipal service reviews that LAFCO does. So the issue for us is we have a policy that is dated from 2003 that instructs staff, and the commission for that matter, on how to go about preparing service reviews. Well, keep in mind, in 2003, the world was much different. The service review statute itself had just come out. So I think the policy that we have on the books reflects that period of time where a lot of emphasis was placed on prescribing the procedures to get to a final product. And I think appropriately so, done so to help alleviate some of the concerns from the cities and special districts about this new black box that the legislature had created about what exactly does a municipal service review look like. Well, I think over the last 20 years, we've answered that question through doing. And now, as we look at the policy, I think we're in a position to transition from an emphasis on procedures and processes to outcomes. So before this committee is staff's draft effort to update the policy to reflect not only current and what we think are best or better practices, but to do so in a way that really focuses in on the outcomes. And in particular, one of the key parts of this policy is take all the procedural issues that we currently prescribe in some detail and just simply create a all-encompassing sentence that says that's on the executive officer. The executive officer will figure out the scope of work, the assumptions, and all the details that go into it. But the commission wants to be on record as to saying what we're actually going to do with this document. So a couple of quick points. The proposed policy would certainly emphasize the 5-year window effect. And, there was no connection to the last item. I just, 5 years happens to be the theme of the day, I suppose. But under legislature, we have this directive that every 5 years is necessary, we do a service review. Well, okay, well, let's make that 5-year window meaningful in that if we prepare a service review and we set a sphere of influence for agency X, and we do it usually at the same time, we don't want to take on individual applicants' requests to move that sphere over the next 60 months. So in policy, what we're saying is, hey, we're going to set a study schedule for approximately every 60 months. And as we get to your agency, whether you're a landowner, a registered voter, or agency itself, let us know if you want any changes to the sphere, because under this policy, we lock it in after that period. And we're not going to revisit the sphere unless special circumstances warrant it. And I would be one as the EO to tell the commission, hey, unless something truly comes out of left field, we should just keep the sphere stagnant and fixed for 5-year intervals. And when LAFCO does the update, that's when we can consider updates. Also, perhaps a more fundamental issue that we're putting in here is the service review, the results inform any sphere changes, right? I think by way of practice from the day this was established, probably through the first 15 years or so, we decided a different approach at LAFCO where we would let known sphere requests or known changes to spheres decide when we do MSRs. Well, we're flipping the card around and we're going to say in policy, no, the 5-year window to do MSRs will inform how and when we do sphere updates. So those key changes, right? Prescribing all the details of how to prepare the service review to staff, emphasizing in policy that the MSR informs sphere updates, And once LAFCO gets done with fixing a sphere after a 5-year review window, we don't want to touch it for 60 more months. Those three are really the pillars of what this policy is about. So the commission took a first reading of it at its last meeting. Well, not its last meeting, but its meeting, I believe, August. So your input, both as individual agency members or collectively as the committee, I will take to the commission at our December meeting. So we have some time. So any initial feedback that you have, great. Otherwise, perhaps consider this, bring it to your respective district boards. And if you want to submit comments by way of that dais, please do so. And I think our form, I don't know the exact date, but I'm guessing you have at least through Thanksgiving to submit some comments on this draft policy. So with that, Chair, be happy to answer any questions here or certainly offline.
Thank you for that report. Mr. Kennedy, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Keen, for the document. And Tammy was kind enough to send me in Word format, the previous one and the current one, so I could do a compare. But boy, those things are completely different. So it wasn't much of a red line version. But I did review it, and I think there are appropriate guidelines in there. I think that municipal servants review are important for all of our agencies to do, and it's an important function of LAFCO. And keeping on schedule at LAFCO with those is important. So I hope you get the resources you need from the commission to do so. The one thing I would say is that should this take effect prior to detachment, we want to make sure it's not retroactive, because the Water Authority hasn't had one in the last 5 years, and we don't, as I mentioned in the previous item, we've already analyzed the impact of detachment on the Water Authority. So an MSR isn't really necessary for that process to conclude. Thank you.
I hadn't thought about the retroactive nature, but now I'm gonna marinate on that, Tom. So more to come. Thank you.
Do we have any other committee members with comments or inputs? All right, I read it and I thought it was very thorough, comprehensive. I like having something, especially it was fairly easy to read. My only thing off the top of my head was item 2B says the 9 determinations required by government code, and item 4A says the 7 service review determinations. Somewhere in the document, it'd be nice to know what those are. So I don't have to go Google the government code and pull them up. So I don't know if you can do an appendix, like a attachment A, and say what they are, just for ease for the reader. That would be my only suggestion. Does anyone else have any comments or suggestions on this? Okay, it sounds like you have probably until that November 30th deadline, if it's right after Thanksgiving, to provide input. And I'm assuming this is going to the commission in the December, January timeframe?
So the goal would be December 5th is our goal line.
Okay.
So thank you, Tom and Chair, for the comments, and others certainly feel free to submit comments individually or through your member agencies through the 30th of November. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, with that, we are on to committee member reports. So any committee member can give a report on anything of interest that is happening at your district in the special district world. Anyone have anything they'd like to offer out? Mr. Lau.
Thank you, Chair. Just on behalf of San Diego chapter CSDA, formally invite all of you to attend our November 17th dinner meeting. We're going back to the butcher shop, so hopefully we can see you there. Thanks.
Fabulous, thank you.
Al, you buried the lead. We're looking for more nominees for running for
yes,
the board.
That's true too, Tom. Thanks for the reminder.
Come on, I am the nominations chair, so.
Yeah, you are. So you want to take it?
Well. We need more victims, nominees to serve on the board of the San Diego CSDA. So if anybody's interested, just get a hold of me and we'll get you on the ballot. We do have one candidate for each of the open positions, which I believe is president, first vice president, and treasurer. Or is it second vice president? I can't remember. But we're looking forward to filling those. Secretary.
Right,
So-
but in a event, I believe some of the existing incumbent is actually applying for this other position, which may leave other position open as well. So
4 more years, Al, 4 more years.
no. If that's the case, I'm going to draft you back.
I'm retiring next year.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Anyone else have anything they'd like to share? No,
Yes, I would. I'm sorry. Listen,
don't be sorry. Thank you, Mr. Stelzner.
I'm always looking for my hand. I can't find it sometimes on my phone, but we wanted to announce that we have a new general manager, Brian Only. He was director of our water quality for a number of years, been at the district for a number of years, and we're really excited to have a new general manager. He's already up to speed, and look forward to all you guys meeting him at some of the CSDA and some of the other little events that are coming up. Also, wanted to report that we were successful in retaining some WIFIA loans for our advanced water treatment program here in East County, and it means a lot to our district to give us a little jump start to get that implemented. But that's all I have. Thank you.
Congratulations on that. I did see that giant check on the social media feed. So congratulations on that WIFI loan.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything else they'd like to share about anything going on at their district? Mr. Simons.
Well, I apologize for jumping in on the district reports, but before I forget, I didn't put a place on this for the agenda. I did want to just highlight, for the chair's benefit, but certainly as you collect comments from your brethren on the committee. So as we all know, there's going to be some changes to the Brown Act coming up in January.
Yes.
And so perhaps some forethought into how we want to start proceeding with meetings. I know we had started off, I thought, with a really nice hosting by Paul Bushy at Lucadia. We will probably bring you an agenda item in December where we perhaps update how we want to conduct meetings, both in a way that's consistent with this new law that Alex probably could recite right off the top, but also I do like the idea of visiting the districts if they're willing to host. So just a radar comment as we go forward.
I think that's an excellent topic. I've been on this committee long enough to remember fighting for space in the downtown areas, fighting for space in the Kearney Mesa area, and then also when we did rotate through the different agencies hosting. So I think that would be a fantastic agenda item for next time, because I do know that the new laws are very complicated to understand regarding the hybrid telecommuting meetings. If we did go the route of agencies hosting in December, I would offer Liebenheim would host the first meeting of 2023. We do have a new facility that actually will fit everyone. All right. Anyone else have anything else before we get to adjourning the meeting? All right, thank you so much for the staff presentation, Adam and Priscilla, for the presentation today. And oh, Mr. Miller, I do see your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to announce that next year will be the 100th anniversary of BID of their existence, and we will be having some celebrations scheduled next year, and we would invite everybody to come and visit when we get that scheduled. So thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations. All right. With that, we are adjourned, and we will see you all likely online in December. Thank you all.
Thank you, Kim.